Even Porsche Germany couldn't solve this, the CEO said then. The single dad opened the hood. Ingrid Vasquez had 11 days until the launch event that would either save Meridian Motors or confirm every doubt the industry had been quietly circulating about her company for the last 2 years. And the prototype sitting in Bay 4 of her Detroit facility had developed a fault that 3 separate engineering teams, including a specialist unit flown indirectly from Porsche's own Weissach Development Center in Germany, brought on as paid consultants specifically for this crisis, had failed to resolve. She was 44, the founder and CEO of Meridian Motors, an electric performance vehicle startup that had spent 6 years and nearly $400 million in venture funding building toward a single moment, the public unveiling of the Meridian Ansel, a hypercar meant to prove that an American startup could compete directly with a century of German and Italian engineering pedigree. The car's next-generation battery architecture, paired with a proprietary drivetrain system, had been the company's entire technical thesis from day one. 11 days from now, in front of investors, press, and a wait list of 600 buyers, who'd each put down $100,000 deposits, the Ansel prototype was supposed to complete a live demonstration lap that would either validate everything Meridian had promised or, if it failed publicly, likely end the company entirely. For the past 6 days, the prototype had developed an intermittent power delivery fault. The drivetrain would inexplicably cut torque for a fraction of a second, under specific load conditions. An issue invisible on the diagnostic computer, appearing only during actual driving, unpredictable. And so far, unsolvable. Even the team from Weissach couldn't isolate it, Ingrid said, standing in Bay 4 with her arms crossed, watching the Porsche specialists pack up their diagnostic equipment after 4 days of work that had produced nothing but a longer list of ruled-out possibilities. 4 days. Their best drivetrain engineers, nothing. Desmond Okonkwo had been working the overnight shift in Meridian's prototype fabrication bay for 2 years. One of maybe 6 technicians on the floor who'd actually been present for the Ansel's entire build process, from bare chassis to rolling prototype. He was 39, a single father raising his 11-year-old son Kwame Malone, since his wife's death 4 years earlier, and he'd taken the overnight shift specifically because it let him handle school pickup and homework in the afternoons, before heading in at 10 p.m., a schedule that worked for his family but had also quietly made him nearly invisible to the layers of engineering leadership, who mostly interacted with the day shift. He'd watched the Weissach team's investigation from a respectful distance over the past 4 days, listening to their diagnostic approach, and had formed an opinion he hadn't yet voiced to anyone, not out of timidity. Exactly. But because a night shift fabrication technician offering an opinion that contradicted a team of Porsche-trained specialists wasn't a conversation that seemed likely to go anywhere productive. But on the 5th day, watching Ingrid stand in the bay with her arms crossed, visibly running out of both time and options, Desmond found the floor supervisor, Yara Osei, and asked for 2 minutes. "I think I know what it is," he said. "I've thought so since day 2, actually." Yara studied him for a moment, then made a decision that would matter more than she initially understood. "Tell Ingrid, not me." Her directly. Ingrid was skeptical, not dismissive. Exactly, because she'd built her career avoiding the specific mistake of ignoring people simply because of their job title, but genuinely doubtful that a fabrication technician had spotted something 4 specialized drivetrain engineers had missed across 4 full days of dedicated diagnostic work. "I built the wiring harness for that drivetrain myself," Desmond said, when she finally gave him the 2 minutes he'd asked for. "Not designed it, built it, physically, by hand, during prototype assembly, 8 months ago. I know exactly where every run goes, every bend, every connector, because I routed it myself before the car had a single body panel on it. The Weissach team has already mapped the entire electrical architecture," Ingrid said, "multiple times. They mapped it against the schematic," Desmond said. "I'm telling you what's actually in the car, which isn't always exactly what's on the schematic. There was a late design change to the battery cooling manifold about 2 weeks before I finished the harness build. It moved a coolant line about 4 centimeters, closer to one of the high current cable runs than the original spec called for. I remember it specifically because I had to reroute a section of harness to keep clearance, and I did it by hand, on the fly, without it ever going back through formal documentation, because we were racing a deadline that week too. Ingrid went very still. You're saying the coolant line is interfering with the wiring. I'm saying that under specific load conditions, hard acceleration, the kind that draws maximum current through that exact cable, run heat and vibration together, might be enough to cause a momentary signal disruption. Where that reroute sits close to the coolant line, it wouldn't show up on a static diagnostic. It would only show up under real driving load, which is exactly when the fault's been happening. And it wouldn't be in any schematic the WISAC team was working from, because the deviation never got formally documented. It only exists in my memory and about 4 centimeters of cable I bent by hand 8 months ago. Ingrid pulled the WISAC team back in immediately, and within the hour, with Desmond guiding them directly to the exact section of harness he remembered rerouting, the specialists confirmed it. A chafed section of shielding, invisible without physically disassembling, that precise segment of the harness, exactly where Desmond had described, exactly matching the fault's behavior under load. The fix took less than a day once they knew where to look a problem that 4 days of world-class diagnostic expertise hadn't solved. Resolved within hours, once someone with hands-on memory of an undocumented deviation pointed directly at it. The lead WISAC engineer, a meticulous man named Julius Brandt, who'd spent 4 days increasingly frustrated by an invisible fault, shook Desmond's hand with a kind of respect that clearly cost him something to extend, given the circumstances. We were chasing a schematic, he admitted. You were chasing a memory of your own hands. That's not something we could have replicated with any amount of equipment. Ingrid didn't let the moment pass quietly. She'd spent 6 years building Meridian motors on a specific philosophy she'd occasionally struggled to fully live up to under pressure. That the people physically building the cars often understood them more intimately than the engineers who designed them on paper. And that flattening the distance between fabrication floor and executive leadership wasn't just good ethics. It was good engineering. Why didn't you say something on day one? She asked Desmond. Once the fix was confirmed and the prototype had completed 3 flawless test laps, because a night shift tech contradicting a specialist team flown in from Germany isn't usually a conversation that goes anywhere, Desmond said. Honestly, I've worked here 2 years. I've never once been in a meeting with engineering leadership. I wasn't trying to be difficult by waiting. I just didn't think anyone would actually listen. Ingrid absorbed that and didn't try to soften it or explain it away, because she recognized, uncomfortably, how true it probably was. The launch event, 11 days later, went exactly as Meridian Motors needed it to. The Ansel completed its demonstration lap flawlessly in front of investors, press, and 600 waitlisted buyers, and the coverage that followed focused, as Ingrid had hoped, on the car's performance rather than any hint of the crisis that had nearly derailed it days earlier. But the story that mattered more inside the company happened afterward, in a set of changes Ingrid made over the following months that reshaped how Meridian operated at a structural level. She created a formal pathway for fabrication floor feedback to reach engineering leadership directly, without needing to route through layers of management that had, for 2 years, made someone like Desmond functionally invisible, despite having more hands-on knowledge of the actual prototype than almost anyone in the building. She promoted Desmond to a newly created role lead fabrication liaison, bridging the physical build floor and the engineering team, with a salary and title that finally reflected the value of exactly the kind of hands-on knowledge that had saved the company's most important product launch in its history. The scheduling flexibility of the role, deliberately structured at Ingrid's insistence, meant Desmond never had to choose again between his son's afternoons and the job that needed him. Kwame visited the facility once, months later, standing beside his father in Bay 4, watching a new prototype take shape, and asked the question every 11-year-old eventually asks about a parent's most significant professional moment. Were you scared? Telling the CEO she was wrong. Desmond considered the question, honestly. A little, he admitted, but I was more scared of staying quiet and watching something I helped build fail in front of everyone, when I already knew what was wrong with it. Sometimes the scarier thing isn't speaking up. It's staying quiet and living with what happens. Because you did. Ingrid keeps a 4-centimeter length of chafed cable, shielding in a small display case in her office. Now, not the actual piece from the prototype, which was replaced and is long gone, but a duplicate section Desmond made for her, at her request, as a permanent reminder of the exact lesson that 4 days and a team of specialists from Germany had needed a single overnight fabrication technician to teach the entire company. The schematic tells you what a car is supposed to be. The person who built it with their own hands sometimes knows what it actually is. The end.